Welcome into Sportsmemo's betting podcast. It's college football edition. We're breaking down the AAC East Division with mid-major Matt Joesphs. Welcome in. How are you doing today?
Everything is fine and dandy as we approach the college football season.
Absolutely. Approaching it, we are, and we are in baseball season. Matt has been great in baseball season of late. 7-1 his last 9. He does have a push in there. And also, if you follow us on Twitter, either Sportsmemo or the Sportsmemo Free Plays Twitter handle, he is 24-12 year to date with all of his free plays. So he's been giving out a bunch of free plays, been doing well as well. So check him out. You can check out his handicapper page on sportsmemo.com. We got Matt, the AAC East here in mid-major. Matt, it says it in your name, man. You know these non-Power 5 conferences very well, so wanted to get you on here to break these down, and we'll go down in ABC order. But is there anything you wanted to throw out to the listeners as far as how you approach your off-season college football and more specifically in the AAC conference?
So usually what I do and what I've done so far is I go through everybody's schedules and I do basically wins, losses, toss-up type games. I try and make my win totals before they come out because I don't want to let the market influence me. So, I've done all the AAC teams. I've got all my records for all of them, and I kind of decide, toss-up games. So I do it 2 times, though. So I buy the Athlon magazine because I feel like it's probably the second best magazine out there. So I'll go through the Athlon preview, I'll read their stuff, and I'll go through the schedule and write down my records. And then the second time around, this week or next week, I'm going to have my Phil Steele magazine, and I'll just do the records once again, and I'll do the schedules once again because it looks a little different in Phil's magazine and stuff like that. And then hopefully by the time that I'm done, 2 run-throughs, I'll have my numbers, the market will have their numbers, and then I'll just try and see where we are greatly different and, take an over or under with regards to that.
No, great stuff. I do the same thing, trying to put out my numbers before the market does and then just go right into it, bet into it, and that's how I've done the best in the past as well. So, yeah, tip of the cat to you. And we'll get down each game in here in the AAC, or each team, in the East Division. We'll come back in the West next week. But starting off, ABC order, we got Central Florida, the UCF Knights, 12-1 last year. Did lose their bowl game, of course, without their starting quarterback, Mackenzie Milton. Big loss for him there, Matt. In conference, 9-0, swept the board in the AAC. Looks like ATS 9-4 last year, so made a good amount of money for their backers, and actually surprisingly trended a little bit towards the under. 5-8 is the numbers I'm seeing here. Of course, that depends which numbers you're going off of, but a small trender towards the under. What are you thinking for UCF this year? Can they keep up this kind of powerhouse G5 football team that we've all kind of come to know here in Orlando?
Well, the first thing to look at when you look at UCF is the non-conference games, and we'll look at the non-conference games for everybody because they help determine, A, where this team is going, and B, their win-loss record. Florida A&M, at Florida Atlantic, Stanford at home, and at Pittsburgh. That's a very interesting first 4 because you've got your cupcake FCS team. Florida Atlantic will be tough, but it's not one of their better teams. Stanford is, it's always physical when you play Stanford. And then a road game at Pittsburgh. Last year they crushed Pittsburgh at home 45-14. The first thing you look at here is obviously no Mackenzie Milton. So he's still rehabbing from the leg injury. They've got a really intriguing decision to make. You've got Dario Mack Jr., who is comfortable in the system, didn't look great in their games, but didn't, lose too many of them. And then you've got Notre Dame transfer Brandon Wimbush, who comes over. He's got all the flash, all the, excitement that surrounded him. Yes, he lost the job at Notre Dame to Ian Book, but Brandon Wimbush has some talent, and if they get the right people around him, he's possibly a really good quarterback. They've got some skill position guys. Otis Anderson, Greg McCrae, and Adrian Killins Jr. in the backfield, and Gabriel Davis and Trey Nixon out wide. So the skill position guys are there. The offense may be able to be just as good as it was last year.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mac. As far as the offense being just able to be almost as good. I mean, it depends a lot on the quarterback play. What are you thinking here for their defense?
Well, the defense has lost a lot of pieces. I mean, when you look at this team, they lost their top 4 tacklers. They lost their really good middle linebacker, Pat Chazinski, and 2 of their top 3 safeties from last year. That's about 80 starts. That's a lot of starts right there. And they've got some decent pieces back. You look at a Nate Evans at linebacker and some of these guys in the back end. But as far as I'm concerned, the defense just has to make a couple of stops. Because if you think about a lot of their games as we go over this conference, they're going to probably put up 30 points or more. If they find the right quarterback, if they get the right skill position guys in motion, the defense just has to make a couple of stops and just try not to screw things up. And that's kind of been the key somewhat in the past for UCF. They score a lot of points, and they get defensive stops when they need to.
And Matt, what are you thinking as far as the UCF program? Are they going to be able to keep this up, not only this year, but the following year in against their competition here in the AAC? You think they'll still be able to be kind of above everybody else like we've seen the last 2 years?
Well, I mean, they're a Florida school. They're a large Florida school. They've got a very nice stadium. They've got a solid fan base. They've got a coach in Josh Heupel who may or may not be there for a while. There's a lot surrounding this program. I think they got a lot of attention when they didn't make the playoff the year they went undefeated, and how they had the banner and how they had the stuff on campus that made them seem like the national champions. I think they got a lot with that. But as long as they keep winning Florida, kids over to their program, right now they're in better shape somewhat than Miami. They're in better shape somewhat than Florida State. Their biggest competition are those two schools. Florida is starting to pick it up a little bit, but you keep winning some battles for Florida kids. There's plenty of them out there. I think UCF can continue. Now, 12-1, 11-1, 1 loss, 2 loss, 3 losses, maybe not, but I think this is going to be a consistent bowl team.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, bowl team for the foreseeable future, absolutely. And what about this Stanford game, man? That's one of the top games I'm looking forward to in all of college football, really, just because of the contrasting styles, East and West going on, little versus big, whatever you want to call it. What are you thinking for that single game?
Well, here's the thing. So this could be a spot play situation. Stanford the week before is at USC. It's always a hotly contested game. And then the week after, they host Oregon. So it's kind of like right in the middle of an early stretch of conference games. Stanford's got 3 starters back on offense, a couple starters back on defense. They're not going to be as good. There's no Bryce Love in the backfield, although I kind of like Cameron Scarlett and some of these other guys that they could potentially use. I haven't looked too much at Stanford yet, obviously, but I think based off the spot alone at USC, Oregon sandwich, who knows how focused they would be for this one. Maybe UCF takes advantage. It's really hot that day. The crowd gets into it. Maybe they take advantage of it.
Good stuff, Matt. On the first team, UCF Knights here in the East Division. We're going down alphabetical order with Mid-Major Matt at Mid-Major Matt on Twitter. Check all of his packages out at sportsmemo.com. Let's talk the Cincinnati Bearcats up next. 11-2 last year, 6-2 in conference. Looks like 7-6 ATS and 6-7 trended small towards the under here, Matt. Seeing Cincinnati is kind of a trendy pick to do very well this upcoming year. They did have a kind of a breakout year, obviously, in their record last year. What are you thinking for the Bearcats this year?
Well, once again, we'll start out with their non-conference games. They get UCLA, they get at Ohio State, they get Miami of Ohio, and they get at Marshall. 4 interesting games in their own right, a couple of Power 5 schools, the MAC Cupcake that they usually have, and then 2 weeks to prepare for Doc Holliday's Marshall team. I think we'll learn a lot about this Cincinnati team actually through their non-conference schedule. Then after that, they get UCF at home on October 4th and then play at Houston, which will be an interesting road trip. They get Temple at home, who is another contender. So I think this schedule lays out nice. The question is Desmond Ridder going to play well at quarterback? He was 20 touchdowns, 5 interceptions last year. Michael Warren's a really good running back and a guy you want to build around. But once again, you got a rebuilt offensive line here. You've got some question marks out wide maybe, and you got a defense who was good, but then at other times they weren't great. They averaged 17.2 points per game on defense, but once again, they played a very easy schedule for the most part last year, and they struggled against some of their better opponents defensively. So they can be very aggressive on defense, and the schedule lines up nicely. They could be a contender to knock off UCF.
Yeah, I could see it. I mean, if you had to pick a team to knock UCF off their perch here, Temple you could throw in there, South Florida, but I would put Cincinnati as the one, at least in the east side of the division. As we move down from 2 of the best teams in the AAC in alphabetical order, we'll go to, in my opinion, the worst team, the UConn Huskies, 1-11 last year, 0-8 in the AAC. We got ATS just 2-9-1. So money burner last year if you were back in the Huskies, and 7-5 towards the over. What are you thinking for UConn this year, Matt?
Well, let's just say this: if you were ever backing the UConn Huskies, then you really had some issues, because last year they allowed over 50 points per game on defense. That's right, 50 points per game and over 600 yards of offense. That's not good numbers. They do bring back 9 starters on defense, but if you're bringing back 9 starters from that kind of defense, what does that tell you? UConn's non-conference games: Wagner at home, probably one of their 2 or 3 wins. Illinois, who's not great, maybe another win. At Indiana, and then they play at UMass. I think the case with the UConn Huskies is we're trying to find victories, or we're trying to find potential victories. If you look at Wagner, that's probably a win. Wagner's not as good of an FCS school. Illinois, I mean, the tiebreaker is that UConn's home. They're not beating Indiana. They're not winning at UCF. They're not winning at Tulane. They're probably not beating South Florida. At UMass is a possible, and East Carolina at home is a possible. This is a program that took several steps back when they brought Randy Edsall back. It was an uninspired hiring. It was a unimaginative hiring. And what kind of juice is a school like that that's hemorrhaging money in its athletic department? Why would they put a lot of effort into a bad football team? It kind of shows with the Randy Edsall hire.
Yeah, interesting. So when you say they're losing a lot of money in their sports program, huh, Matt?
Well, the athletic department's losing some money, and some of the basketball team has been underperforming. The women's basketball team is it's not going to make as much money. So, it's just, you read some of the stories about UConn as a whole, as an athletic department, and they're potentially losing some money. And I just think they may not win a conference game. So then you're looking at kind of the out-of-conference games, and you decide, well, are they going to beat Wagner and Illinois at home? Could they win at UMass? It's probably a 2 or 3 win year for the Huskies.
In Matt, I'm seeing here, over 600 points given up for UConn. Now, granted, some of that's, the AAC has some pretty powerful offenses in UCF, USF, and more than just that, Memphis and company. But in your opinion, is this the worst defense in all of college football?
Yeah, well, it's one of them, if not the worst. They gave up last year 49 points to FCS's Rhode Island. They gave up 49 points at Tulsa. They gave up 62 at home to SMU. 9 starters back means maybe they build off of it and maybe they allow 40 points per game. But I don't know. I'd have to finish my research, but they're definitely towards the bottom as one of the worst, definitely the worst defense in the conference. That's for sure.
Yeah, we got East Carolina up next. The ECU Pirates, 3-9 last year, 1-7 in conference. Man, this program has really come down, Matt. 0-5 on the road, 4-8 against the spread, 7-5 towards the over. What are you thinking here for ECU this year?
So unlike UConn, I really like the direction East Carolina went. They hired Mike Houston from James Madison, very familiar with him from covering him and talking to him while coaching there. Here's a guy, Mike Houston, that had a really good offense. They had a really good defense. He brought a lot of his staff with him to East Carolina. They ran a pace-type offense, and they were very aggressive on defense. East Carolina's non-conference games, they play a lot against state school or area schools. They play at NC State. They host Gardner-Webb. They host William & Mary, an FCS school, and they play at an Old Dominion team who is experiencing a little downturn themselves. The key here is, what can Mike Houston do with Holton Ahlers, or Ahlers, however you pronounce it. He's got some measurables that make him a decent quarterback. You've got Reed Herring to back him up if Holton doesn't work out, but I think unlike UConn, here's a program. They're not going to be good this year. Let's get that out of the way. But I think this at least is a program that's looking up, and they may win between 3 and 5 games this year if you give them. They've got a good stadium, a good fan base. I've been to that stadium before. They get really loud there when it's time. They may not show up a ton this year, but I still think this is a program, as opposed to UConn, that's at least somewhat on the rise.
Yeah, I could see that, and it's good that you're inspired by the hire, at least offensively. They can get some excitement. I like the fact that when smaller, maybe G5 schools play a geographically friendly out-of-conference schedule, because I think it kind of helps recruiting. Do you agree?
Yeah, and they were supposed to play Virginia Tech, but the whole problems they had last year, and these two schools have had some issues with regards to scheduling, and when East Carolina couldn't fly to Virginia Tech because of the hurricane, and Virginia Tech took it personally, so they took Virginia Tech out of the schedule. The defense, at times was good. They had a front six that was pretty good. Now Nate Harvey has gone on defensive end, and their numbers aren't great, but of course we just talked about UConn. East Carolina allowed just under 440 yards per game. If they can just put a little bit more into their offense, you could see this team being the type of team that you take a bunch of overs, or you may see a bunch of high 50s, low 60s type games with East Carolina this year, and they may actually do their part in part of that, as opposed to it just being like a 50-14 type contest.
And Matt, where are you talking to us from in Virginia, correct?
Yes, outside of Richmond, Virginia.
Okay, and for the listeners that you're not necessarily a regular on the podcast, we love having you, and mostly college basketball and college football here. But what else are you doing besides just your service at sportsmemo.com?
So I work for a sports radio station down here. We do a lot with Richmond and James Madison and William & Mary and Tech and UVA. I every year, so in another month or so, I'll be going to ACC Media Day and talking to coaches and players and a lot of media that surrounds the ACC, and occasionally I get the commissioner on. And so I feel like, everybody's got their angles and everything, but like I talk to a lot of the coaches and potential players in some of the games, at least in this area. So I feel like that helps me with regards to my knowledge. We are the Redskins station in town, so I'm familiar. I'll be at Redskins training camp every day, as I am usually the past couple of years. So I feel like there's a lot of good handicappers out there, but I provide a little bit of a different perspective than sometimes some of the others do.
Absolutely. An inside look at college football and college basketball. Check him out on Twitter at MidMajorMatt. His services at sportsmemo.com. And guys, don't forget about the coupon code CFBPOD. That's CFBPOD at checkout for Mid-Major Matt's full NFL and college football season for $300 off, or you can do it for myself, Drew Martin's full season of any football, college football, NFL and college football combination, $300 off using the coupon code CFBPOD, CFBPOD at checkout. We got a couple teams left here, Matt. Let's break them down. We got the USF Bulls, 7-6 last year. Talking about the South Florida Bulls here, 4-9 ATS. So for whatever it was, they could not cover numbers last year. They did make a bowl game, but still lost money for their backers. 6-7, trending towards the under. What are you thinking for the team in Tampa this year, Matt?
Well, it was a tale of two seasons for them. They started out 7-0 and looked really good. They played some good defense. Of course, it helped that they played Elon and Illinois and East Carolina and Tulsa early and UConn. And then they lost at Houston by 21, and then the bottom just dropped out, losing by 26 at home to Tulane. That really shouldn't have happened. They lost by 12 at Cincinnati, by 10 at Temple, by 28 to UCF, and then they limped into their bowl game and lost by 18 to Marshall. So they're going to have to totally just try and rebuild some momentum. They're non-conference games. You like the Wisconsin game or the Stanford game. USF opens up the year against Wisconsin. They play at Georgia Tech. They host South Carolina State. And then a couple weeks later, they host BYU. This team, it's going to rely on the returning starters. Blake Barnett, the Alabama transfer. Alabama, Arizona State. I feel like he's been in a bunch of different schools.
Really?
Jordan Cronkite's a really nice running back to build out of the backfield. Randall St. Felix out wide. They've got the new offensive coordinator, Kerwin Bell, who won a Division II national title. There's a lot surrounding them, but the question is their defense. 6 starters back. The defense struggled at times, as you could tell during that losing streak, 57 to Houston, 41 to Tulane. Just like UCF, the offense is there. The question is, can the defense make the stops when they need to? And you saw it in the first half they did, and in the second half they didn't.
Yeah, and that goes to speak on their ATS record. When teams jump out like that, they get respect in the betting markets, and then when it falls apart, man, that's why they don't cover numbers there. 4-9 ATS for USF. But if you had to pick, USF where they finish in conference last year, you think it's about like last year, 7-6, something like that, or do you think that they can make a run at 9 or 10 wins?
So I have 8-4 for USF this year. I think 8-4 is about right. I think USF is probably going to jockey with Cincinnati for that second place. What helps USF? 3 of their last 4 at home. In November, they get Temple, Cincinnati, and Memphis, and then play at UCF, which may or may not be for the AAC East. So they get a chance all season long to build and to fix things and work on stuff. And then that last couple of games, they have the opportunity. Everything's in front of them with 3 home games and then at UCF. If they are playing good football, this team, if you're looking for value, if you're playing a future maybe and you want to know who could win the AAC East, USF has the pieces and the schedule and everything lining up well to be that sleeper out of the AAC East.
Good stuff, Matt. We got one team left here. Guys, remember the coupon code CFBPOD at checkout, $300 off any football season package. Could be NFL, college football, or the combination. $300 off using the coupon code CFBPOD at checkout. The Temple Owls finishing it off. Again, it's ABC order we're going in. 8-5 last year. In conference, 7-1, Matt. 8-5 also ATS, and 6-7. Another small trender towards the under. What are you thinking for the Temple Owls this year, Matt?
Well, Temple has had 3 head coaches the last couple of months. They had their head coach, Jeff Collins. He went to Georgia Tech. They hired Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz went back to Miami. So then they went to Northern Illinois and picked up Rod Carey, a guy who had a ton of success at Northern Illinois, was a very good regular season coach, but Northern Illinois' postseason wasn't great, and he wasn't a great recruiter. So those are 2 things that he has to iron out because Temple's a really good job. Like, I know if you go back, 15, 20 years, Temple was a dead program in the Big East. They didn't play well in the MAC. But if you look at lately, Jeff Collins, Steve Adazio, Al Golden, some of these other guys, they get good coaches and they get better jobs. If you look on the field, Temple's got Bucknell, Maryland, at Buffalo, and week 4 they play Georgia Tech against their old coach Jeff Collins. So they've got an opportunity to start fast with 4 of their first 6 at home. They get UCF at home. They do play at South Florida. They do play at Cincinnati. So those are 2 tough road trips, but Anthony Russo is a good quarterback. He improved as the year went along. I know it's ugly, 14 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, but he's the right guy for that situation. They have some other options potentially. The offensive line is almost intact. Isaiah Wright's a solid skill position guy. The questions on the offense will be at running back. Who will take the job and who will keep defenses honest? And then on defense, Temple's defense has been very good the last couple of years. And if you look at who's gotten drafted, they just keep churning guys out. Sean Bradley at linebacker, Dan Archibong at defensive tackle. The front line should be pretty solid. Linwood Crump is an underrated corner. They picked up Harrison Hand, a transfer out of Baylor. Benny Walls is a decent safety. Temple's a team on defense that's going to hold you down. So if they can get some consistent offense and if Rod Carey can make the right calls in tight games, I hate to keep saying it, but here's another team that could challenge UCF, even though they play at host UCF and play at Cincinnati, and they also play at USF in late November.
No, good, great breakdown overall, Matt. And just to kind of follow up here with the East Division in particular, you did give out a couple teams that you think could kind of give UCF a shot. Ultimately, if you had to pick who wins the East, are you going to pick any of them, or are you going to go back with the Knights?
I mean, I'm going to take the Knights. I think that I'm going to have Cincinnati second. I'm going to have USF third. I'm going to have Temple fourth. And then I don't really care what the other 2 teams do. And I don't think anybody really cares. I don't know how many times UConn or East Carolina will be on the card other than maybe an over. But I think that's your top 4. But I could be easily swayed because each of them has their strengths. UCF has the quarterbacks and the offense. Cincinnati has the good running back and a solid defense. USF has all those starters back, and their offense could be pretty good. And Temple may have the best defense of the group. So, and on any given week, I think the big thing will be injuries. If whoever stays the healthiest of those 4 could win the division.
Yeah, this is a fun one. I mean, the AAC is heck, it might be my favorite conference to watch. I think it's an underrated conference. I don't think it gets the respect nationally that really it deserves. How do you feel overall about the trajectory of the conference?
I think it's good. I think the commissioner is doing all that he can to get them into that. He keeps trying to push the Power Six initiative, by basically saying how the AAC is the sixth team. You look at the last couple of years, they've had some success in bowl games. And when we do the West, we'll look at the Houston and Memphis. Houston's been a team that's made a lot of waves. Navy had a couple of good years. Now they're going to fall in some tough times. But there's some name brand programs here. If they keep playing good football and they keep threatening, big time bowl games, I think the AAC can consistently keep up, especially if they're flagship programs, UCF, USF. I guess Temple's one of them. Houston up there. I mean, Houston got Dana Holgorsen. I mean, that's pretty big for this conference when you look at the head coaches that are in this conference. That Dana Holgorsen would leave West Virginia and go to Houston.
Yeah, and also, the recruiting in this conference, Matt. You bring up the coaching, it's top-notch. The recruiting, I mean, you got Florida, Texas, Louisiana, the Carolinas. You got a lot of hotbed recruiting areas. And, when we talk about teams like UConn, do you see these type of teams being able to turn it around, especially because, the recruiting, kind of they're up against it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think East Carolina can. If Mike Houston stays and Mike Houston keeps building it, I think East Carolina can, because they did have a tradition. They had a tradition. I mean, Jeff Blake was a quarterback at East Carolina. I don't know about UConn. I really don't. You have to look at their last couple years. They had that one brief stretch, and then it kind of faded away. And as I said, I feel like hiring a retread in Randy Edsall, it's like, what benefit does that do? Why would alumni want to donate money to the football program? Why would boosters want to be involved with this program when you're basically saying, oh, yeah, let's go get Randy Edsall and try and recapture the magic that we had with Randy Edsall? I mean, Randy Edsall was 78-90 in 14 years at UConn. And they're like, oh, okay, let's just rehire him.
Yeah, really. But so I don't get that either. I don't think there was a lot of success there. But overall, I think the future is bright for the AAC, an exciting conference overall. And guys, don't forget the coupon code CFB at CFB Pod at checkout for $300 off any football full season service at Mid-Major. Matt, thanks for the time, bud. Anything else you want to throw out before we shut this down?
No, just looking forward to it, and looking forward to the win totals coming out and helping people cash for this coming football season.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for the time. We'll have you back on talking the West Division. And guys, best of luck with your bets.